Welcome to the first episode of our Indo Pak Diaries podcast series. I'm Alu. For reasons of anonymity, I've gone with my favorite vegetable that one can do a lot with, and I've invited my friend Gobi onto this podcast to be a part of it. Now, Alu and Gobi, we have known each other a long time, roughly about 10 years, would you say?
Yeah, a little more than 10 years.
Little more than 10, yeah. We met in university, and I mean, I will proudly proclaim that we are graduates of one of the top 100 universities in the world. And I often find us to have, a nuanced, well-researched understanding of geopolitical events, or at least the ability to have perspective. And with the recent Indo-Pak tensions, I thought it might be a good idea to start this podcast, um, so that, we could just create a space where an Indian and a Pakistani could discuss, the geopolitical reasons for strife between our countries and also highlight some of the more, hidden motivations that might be going on and unfolding, given that the news is so polarized, or the coverage of the recent events, anyways, was so polarized that I was concerned about, more than ever, about mutually assured destruction if we are not able to bridge the gap, or at least reduce the kind of polarity. So that kind of inspired me to start this podcast series, and I'm so glad that my friend has agreed to join. But I wanted to ask you, Gobi, why did you agree to join me on this podcast?
I just thought it was gonna be a fun thing to do and just to put our opinions out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you and I would be like the perfect political commentators because we've been doing this. Like the world doesn't know, but this is what we've been doing for like 10 years on the phone with each other. So it's great that, we have this dynamic that we don't even need to put an effort to create a podcast, to be honest. But yeah, I'm really glad you've joined us for as a guest, as you said the last time. We'll see what that relationship turns into. But yeah, so as I said, Gobi and I, we met in university, and we've both been educated abroad outside of our respective countries, and have, been able to have some kind of distance, or create some kind of cognitive dissonance in terms of, what's going on with our home countries in the subcontinent. And sometimes it's easier because that distance, creates some perspective. It gives us the ability to view things a bit more equanimously, or a bit more with a bit, with an even temper, so to speak. And you know, as people who were educated abroad, we had a lot of friends who were from the other side of the border. And I just wanted to ask you, Gobi, about your experience. How do you feel like that relationship translates when it comes to Indians and Pakistanis being friends, uh, being outside of the subcontinent versus inside of the subcontinent?
Yeah, like in my experiences, I've had very good friendship with a lot of people from Pakistan or even other countries. And I think the shared culture and language makes it easier to connect and uh, build friendships. So it's, in my opinion, I've seen very good friendship and very good relation between people from India and Pakistan, uh, at least outside the subcontinent. But in the subcontinent, like I don't think there's a lot of people, a lot of interaction between people from the other country. So that is maybe leading to the polarizing of views and the hatred scene because people don't interact with other people, the people from other countries. So it it creates that distance between them. Uh, if you have more relation with each other, then there's more understanding and uh, it helps to decrease the polarization.
Just like, you know, being exposed to each other, because I know there is a lot of exposure that our countries have when it comes to you know, the sharing of music, you know, certain, you know, rituals within our weddings and you know, songs and even movies and things like that. And we have so much in common, whether it comes to like you know, norms, gender norms or molarity norms as well, in terms of what's acceptable versus not, the way society is organized, you know, patriarchy as well, and misogyny. There's quite a bit we do share, and I think it's easy to remember that when you are outside and you know you don't have that border, like you said, like we, it's easier for us to connect on those you know, similarities. But I feel like I have noticed that sometimes even though we are outside of the subcontinent and we are connecting on, you know, the similarities in our macro cultures, certain differences in the microculture do show up. And I have found in my experience that sometimes some of my friends who are from India, um, despite having exposure to Pakistanis outside, and you know, vice versa, like Pakistanis, despite having exposure to Indians outside, have still kind of insisted that we are a completely different kind of people and we are completely different from each other. Where do you think that is coming from, and why do you think it is that way?
Yeah, like I think there is a difference in what people believe to be true and what the reality is. People think on both sides that like culture is based on religion or nationality, that like one nation will have a culture and like one religion will have a culture, or sometimes they think that their religion is their culture. So in India, there is a big insistence that like there is a history of it's like a big history of the civilization going back thousands of years, and they trace the culture back to those origins. And in Pakistan, I feel like they try to change that and trace their origin to like Middle Eastern culture and derive their origin from there, even though they're like part of Indus Valley and they have lived here for thousands of years. So, but there is a difference between like a macro culture and a micro culture. Like there is a shared beliefs like festivals and uh, language, music, art, so societal norms, which is common across the subcontinent, but there's also regional differences based on local languages, local customs, which don't stop at the border, uh, which the whole region has as a whole. Like, for example, in Bengal, the Bengali culture doesn't stop just because it's Bangladesh. Like they have a shared culture, shared language, and similarly on the western side, they have like a shared culture there. So that is the reality, but people, because they are on the different side of the border, they perceive that their culture is different and the other side is a different culture.
Yeah, I feel like lately I've been noticing that a lot more than I did in my parents' generation. I mean, I really would have to ask my parents, I suppose, what they think or what other people in their generation think about our shared differences and similarities. But I feel like especially in the last couple of years, there has been a recent wave of polarization, and I really can't put my finger on what it is. I don't know if it is the brain drain. I don't know if it is just, increasing radicalization due to like a sense of animosity our countries are feeling towards one another. I really can't put a finger on what it is because, recently I think I was telling you like, one of my cousins got married to somebody here and moved here, and she was saying, really weird things that the rest of our family found quite odd, that like apparently it is haram to eat something made by a Hindu. And the rest of my family that is very Pakistani, very Muslim practicing, found it so odd because, in our household, the sweets come from Hindu restaurants specifically, like Hindu halwais, so they found that kind of a polarity really odd. I'm wondering, have you noticed similar themes of polarity in India or amongst your Indian friends?
Yeah, it's been growing a lot recently. Like it didn't used to be like that earlier. We there's instances of like people not buying things from like Muslim vendors or Muslim shopkeepers and things like that. But I don't know if it's like a general thing. Like on a whole, I still think there's not as much like discrimination like that, or at least polarization within the country. Like they might have hatred towards other country, but within the country, I have not seen so much, or even outside, like there's not that much difference in like going to a Pakistani restaurant or going to Indian restaurant. It's considered almost similar. Like the food is same, and so I don't see a lot of difference on that. Um, but there has been a growing surge of anti uh, Pakistan or anti-Muslim polarization in the country. So that does affect it to some extent.
What do you think, like, the concepts of, or at least the interplay of and the interplay amongst the concepts of identity, nationalism, and patriotism are playing or have played in the recent years, in this rise in polarity?
Yeah, there has been a rise of Hindu nationalism, like Hindutva politics, which does play into all this. But there's also been a rise of misinformation and disinformation on the news media, where they basically play this narrative every night, and the people who listen to it, they do get affected by it. And there's also a lot of speeches or a lot more active uh, sort of hate speech being used all over, which does increase the polarization. Um, but so like that assertion of Hindutva identity, it does cause a polarization where other people are seen with a negative lens. Um,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think even like seeing, when with the unfolding of the recent events, the like even seeing like a mob attack the, famous Karachi bakery in Hyderabad. That was really shocking, especially given the fact that the owners are actually Hindu, just because it had the name Karachi in it, and even the police were really struggling to control that mob from destroying that, the signage of the business. But we didn't really see similar kind of right-wing nationalistic displays against, like, like for example the Bombay Bakery in Pakistan or anything like that. And I think that's a very good thing, even though like Pakistanis are quite patriotic in general, and they were, obviously upset about India's recent operation in Pakistan and things like that. I did notice that, like, how the news media in Pakistan wasn't as sensationalistic as the Indian news coverage. Like, I noticed, like, yeah, n neither of them were being factually accurate, because, the Pakistani media, like, they had a lot of claims of, like, that this was a false flag operation by India without any, like, factual evidence to claim that. So, I mean, safe to say good journalism has gone down the drain in the subcontinent. But I did find that the coverage was a bit different across on the two sides of the border. And I mean, the one thing that I found really odd, I remember because my aunt and I were watching the new Pak Army chief's speech that happened a couple of days before the Pahalgam incident, like how bigoted that speech was. Um, and that's like the first time that we heard anyone in a leadership position within the Pakistani military and government directly speaking about being different from the Hindus. And that shocked us. Like, just watching that speech was very shocking for my aunt and I. I mean, he sounded delusional, to be honest. And it felt like I felt quite upset by it, because, there are Hindus in Pakistan. Like, I know Hindus um, from Pakistan. They're 1 to 2% of the population, and to marginalize that community that has that Pakistani identity in that way seemed very nationalistic. And it was definitely new for me to experience that kind of nationalism. Like, of course, there are extreme factions on both sides of the border, but in general, I have found Pakistanis to be more patriotic than nationalistic. Um, Either that, or they're desperate to get rid of their identity entirely. Like most Pakistanis right now just want to like leave the country and adopt a different identity entirely, and they're like really desperate to do so. Um, given the circumstances, what do you think? How does that, like, for example, contrast in India? Like, do the people in India want to stay there, or are they desperate to leave? Are they just patriotic? Are they just being patriotic? Or do you feel like most of the time they are nationalistic and are not really able to distinguish between being patriotic versus being nationalistic? And what do you think is the marker for that?
yeah, I want to touch on a few things on that, but I don't think there is a big uh, desire for people to leave the country. It depends on different class and different strata of society as well. Like
So are you
the
referring to Pakistanis wanting to leave or Indians wanting to leave? Okay,
Indians, like
yeah.
I don't think there's a big desire there. But like it depends on which section of society we look at, right? If you look at the lower income level, there would be desire to go to like Middle East or some other country to get better income and to uh, get better life condition. But it's not that they want to immigrate out. It's more that they want to go outside to look for better income or better job opportunities and things like that. But there's not a general desire to leave India. Like people usually want to stay in India. And a lot of times, even when people go outside, even other countries, they do feel a desire to go back a lot of times. So it's not like a general hate of India. Like they may go for some other reasons, but they would still prefer living in India if they had good conditions there and things like that. But one other thing I wanted to touch on was the there has been a recent aggressive stance by the uh, BJP government where they are more aggressive in their international relations. Earlier, India used to be more to sort of living within their own uh, sort of zone and not interfering with uh, other countries in their matters, in their internal matters, or taking sort of steps in those other countries. That it was mostly seen as something like other countries would do, like US, China, Pakistan, like they would do these type of things, but India was seen more as a uh, sort of trying to maintain peace and trying to uh, maintain good relations with other countries. But like there have been many incidents, like there was a killing in Canada of one
Najad, the Najad
Khalistani
killing, yeah.
leader, and then there has also been a rise in funding of Balochistan, uh, the people who are fighting there, uh, which has caused a lot of internal problems in Pakistan, which is why Pakistan feels aggrieved in a way because there was an incident before the Pahalgam attack where a train in Balochistan was hijacked by some terrorists and they killed people by checking their ID cards. I think you might have better knowledge on that side, but uh, so I think on Pakistan side, they feel that India orchestrated that, or at least funded the people who did the attack, like provided them weapons or uh, financial aid or other help in that aspect. Because it was a well coordinated attack. Like it's not easy to just hijack a train and do all those type of things. So there was a response, like not I wouldn't say it was a fair response. Like I wouldn't support it was like a heinous terrorist attack in India
I mean, I think it's
where
fair to call it
Pahalgam.
retaliation, right? Because it's not really a
Yeah, but
response. Yeah,
you
it's
don't
retaliation.
retaliate. Yeah,
But
but
it's
you
not
don't.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to make a distinction here because let's say even if India is funding the like terrorists in Balochistan, and I condemn that, like if they're funding it, but it's not as if Indian terrorists are being trained in India and they are crossing the border and then going in Balochistan and hijacking the train and then killing people. It's still like local Balochi people who have their own grievances against the army and the government, and they just have a means to vent their anger or like a way to sort of use that anger, which is very different from what happened in Pahalgam because from at least from what they are reporting, there there was involvement of people who were part of like the advanced forces in Pakistan, like the sort of the uh, who are like well trained in the army, and they crossed the border, and a lot of people involved were given training in Pakistan, and then they crossed the border and then performed the attack. So it's a little bit different. It was still a retaliation, but it was not uh I wouldn't support it in any way. Like I would condemn the attack, and it's it shouldn't have happened. Even if India is supporting that, it doesn't mean Pakistan gets a right to, send terrorists and then kill civilians in India. But like there is a reason why that happened. That's what I wanted to highlight, that it's not
Yeah.
coming out of nowhere. And then another thing I wanted to highlight is the there have been other ways in which like India has been more aggressive than it usually is. One of the things was they suspended the Indus Water Treaty, and the Indus Water Treaty, even before, there were a lot of reports of India trying to renegotiate the terms and stuff like that. And that treaty has been in place for decades now. It has not, no one has tried to change it even when there were multiple wars. So it's very odd that like they're trying to do it now. Uh, and then also there is uh, like during the conflict, uh, there was periods where India there were attacks coming on both sides, but on May 10th, there were like strikes from India on Pakistan's different air bases. And one of the air base, I think it was Noor Khan Air Base, it was close to the Strategic Plans Division, which is the department which oversees the nuclear arsenal in Pakistan. And that generated a lot of like uh, alarm in Washington, because earlier the Trump government, they were of the opinion that it's a fight between India and Pakistan, and we wouldn't intervene in that fight, and they will resolve it among themselves. But after this incident, there were calls coming from JD Vance and Marco Rubio to Modi, and immediately, I think within few days, there was a ceasefire that was negotiated, because there is a treaty between the two countries. It's a non-nuclear aggression agreement where both countries agree not to attack the other country's nuclear facilities or nuclear installations. So when there was a strike so close to that strategic plans division, it was like a big red flag, because that is very dangerous precedent, right? Like once you start going down that road, it can escalate really fast. So these type of escalations and these type of attacks are very alarming, and it it's beyond just polarization and the general enmity. It takes it to the next level where it can get really dangerous really fast.
No, I definitely agree. And I feel like the recent wave of nationalism in India definitely has a role to play because here's where I distinguish between patriotism and nationalism. There is no question that the partition in itself created a lot of patriotism within us, right? Because it created a reason for us to feel different from each other. So naturally, there's a lot of sense of pride in our identity, and we are Indian or we are Pakistani, and we are different from each other, and we are proud of who we are, and here's what we have achieved and whatnot. But I feel like the key difference for me is when it comes to self-criticism and growth in that sense, or at least even being honest with oneself. And I feel like the recent wave of nationalism in India as a national identity, there has been almost like, I've noticed like a lot of figures in the government or even people who were in the foreign services of India, like, and were recently retired or whatever, they have been they have made disparaging comments about Indians who constructively criticize India and call out the Indian state's aggression towards either itself or infringement of freedom of speech within India, and also towards aggression towards other countries. There, and I think that's very dangerous because that kind of nationalistic identity creates this kind of an environment for escalation. And, if you don't have self-criticism, if you are not stopping to evaluate your actions and being like, why are we even doing this? Like, are we doing this for the right reasons, or do we just want death for the other guy because we want to be, viewed as this and that? Like, I think it's coming from like a very egoic place and not really a balanced place, which I think the previous government, like Manmohan Singh's government, was very different compared to this government. And I feel like the current wave, like I've noticed it even amongst like my friends, it's like when we talk about the recent events, some of them who are really well read and whatnot, they are fully aware of what India is doing in Balochistan, but they justify it. They're like, oh, but look at what is happening to the Balochi people, and it's fine if India's supporting the Liberation Army. But why? Why is it fine for you to be interfering in this way in another country's affairs? The right way to do it would be to highlight the human rights abuses or those, enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings in Balochistan at a global level, like through the UN and all of that. Why are you getting involved with supporting the BLA? And then, because of this whole wave of nationalism, even well-read Indians are justifying it as okay and, are refusing to really see the reasons behind the Pakistani army operating in the way it is. Now, I'm not justifying the Pakistani army's actions at all. I found the attack, it's just absolutely abhorrent. I'm very concerned. And I say Pakistani army because I think there's a sham government in Pakistan in place right now. They don't want to be an overt military dictatorship, so they've put like a puppet government in place and they're really the ones operating. And I think that's very concerning for me as a Pakistani. His recent speech, the Pak Army chief's recent speech, had me like recoiling and like literally wanting to vomit at the bigotry. And I feel like now, because of, that wave of nationalism in India, what's happening is it's kind of starting in Pakistan too for the first time. I'm viewing it start. And I think this is because polarity rises together. If you have a nationalistic identity really rising on one side of this border, it's going to rise on the other side. And I think that's really concerning. And I completely agree with you. Like for the future, this would be like very, very alarming because I think, Pakistan really it gets 80% of its water from this Indus Water Treaty. And, if, I think like both sides are to blame. But I'm recently finding that like a lot of Indians are getting, swept up in this wave of nationalism and are refusing to take or at least hold their own government accountable for its actions, which are not okay when it's, performing extrajudicial killings in Canada or supporting the BLA, which has been recognized as a terrorist group in Pakistan.
Yeah,
And
I just wanna make a few points on that. Like, uh, the it is true because the Modi government it's very authoritarian. So authoritarian governments will try to clamp down on any sort of resistance that it sees or any differing opinion, any opposition that it sees. So that is because they have almost absolute majority in the government. The earlier governments, they didn't have absolute majority, so they had to have the support of other parties to be in power. So they couldn't just do anything they want and uh, go with that. But another thing is, you're right, like there is like this narrative in India where I don't know if people know about it and they still think it's okay, or if it's just like the narrative where they think it's okay for India to interfere in Balochistan for some reason. But one other thing I want to highlight is the reason there is such strong actions from the government like is because there's a lot of terrorist attacks that have been happening in India over the past 20, 30 years. And that has really caused the surge in polarization, the increase in the aggressive nature, and all these other things that we discussed. So that is like at the root of where all this is coming from. And um, there is I don't see any indication of that going away, that
Yeah.
Pakistan in any way will take any steps to stop terrorism on
Yeah.
in its borders. So as long as that is happening, the Indian side, they will continue to demand action. They will try to raise the stakes and to do something that makes they are doing all these things to stop Pakistan from supporting these elements and to, curb down all these elements. So that is what is driving or all these other things. If there's all these costs associated with supporting terrorist activities, their hope is that Pakistan will stop its support of these elements. So that's what's driving all this aggression from India. Um, but I'm not sure like how good of a strategy it is. It's we will see in the future like how it turns out. But that's how I see it.
I mean, like, no question about it. Pakistan's had a terrorism problem for a long time, and in part because of the Western powers. Like, they needed us to do their dirty work, and it's really unfortunate that the government at the time and the Pakistani military and intelligence agreed to do this, and they didn't realize the consequences that it would have for the future. Maybe they did, and they did it anyways. That's really, unfortunate. And I feel like the Pakistani people are the ones that are most impacted by the terrorism. It's most definitely not the Indians. Yes, they are impacted. They're really, really impacted, especially like in the last couple of, the last decade or so, or even more, like, the attacks that have occurred um, in India have occurred because it's bled over and whatnot. But I feel like there has been a greater consequence to Pakistanis from that terrorism. And it's really unfortunate that they don't care to even um, eliminate that risk for their own people because they probably benefit from it somehow and they need that in some way. And the thing is, the one time,
Yeah, I just want
like,
to add one thing here.
like,
Sorry, I'm
I mean,
interrupting you,
no, I
but
just okay. Let me finish though. I just want to
okay.
say though, like, I feel like the one time the Pakistani military really launched an offensive to get the terrorists out, they did like a deep offensive, and they really like they went into the forests and like really tried to clear it out because it was really an issue in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Um, you know what happened, right? Like there was the attack on the school that the Pakistani army had for the kids of its you know uh the army personnel. Like their kids all went to a Pakistani army school. They have that inside the cantonment, and outside as well they have schools, and they killed more than 100 children belonging to the army personnel. The terrorists did as retaliation. So it's like I feel like the Pakistanis are the people who have suffered the most. It's really unfortunate that it is this way. Like, I think that's part of the reason why a lot of them want to leave the country, and they're really desperate to leave. But I don't feel like I feel like recently, with India funding the BLA, which is a recognized terrorist state, for them to now be taking the stance, and like recently, India has even refused to come to diplomatic talks with Pakistan. Like I think you'd sent me that article a day or two ago, that it's even refusing to come to the table until terrorism is resolved in Pakistan. One, like that's a completely unreasonable expectation, because I don't think it's possible to resolve terrorism entirely in any country. I'm sure there's domestic terrorism in India as well. And it's impossible to resolve. The second, they're refusing to even have diplomatic talks until it's resolved. So they clearly do not want to have any kind of diplomatic relationship with Pakistan. Three, it's like they're funding the BLA, which is a recognized terror group. So it kind of sounds like the pot calling the kettle black. Like, go ahead. What do you think?
Yeah, so see, that's why I wanted to make the distinction. So, when you say India is supporting BLA, right? It's not causing terrorism problem in India. It's not training terrorists in India to go to BLA and fight for Balochi people. And when you say that Pakistan has been the worst affected, it's because there is no one in control. There's no one who is controlling all the terrorist groups and terrorist cells. It's very loose collection of people who have power. The power is very distributed among different people. So uh, it is true that Pakistan is affected by all of these terrorism activities which are happening, but it's also spilling outside the border to other countries, which is why they have an issue. And like the point you were saying where India is saying it will not come to the table, it's more until Pakistan takes concrete steps to stop supporting terrorism. It's not that terrorism should be eliminated, but it should take some steps, then they will come to the negotiating table. But like in in Pakistan, there are so many different groups that are operating and related to so many different sort of that they have different um aims and goals and ambition, like what they're trying to achieve, that it's slowly going into like where no one would be in control, like you said yourself, there is like terrorism happening in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It's not just uh, like they are just coming out of nowhere. There's actual grievances of local people which are causing them to attack and, cause all of these things. And same thing in Balochistan, there's an actual grievances of people. It's not just that because India is sending money that they're gonna start attacking trains, right? There's an actual anger and problems with the people that they are willing to die for it, right? If Pakistan starts sending money to like some people in India, like they're not gonna just take up arms and start stopping trains and killing people. So there is a problem in Pakistan which is at the core of like why all of these things are happening, why other countries are able to take advantage of it, and the way Pakistan is uh, sort of supporting terrorism or like uh, causing terrorist attacks in other places is the reason why there are all these issues within Pakistan. Because their initial aim was that they will train these people to attack other countries. But once you train them and once you arm them, they're not within your control, and then they start attacking within the country as well. So like there is a lot of problems which are causing all these issues. And unless the Pakistani army or Pakistani government they start taking steps to clamp down on these things, like it's gonna be very difficult uh, in the future. It's only gonna get worse because the Pakistani state is getting weaker, the Pakistani army is losing control. So it's only gonna devolve further and further if they don't stop it now when they still have the power to stop it.
Oh, I do agree with you there. I think like, having experienced Pakistan, I find it to be a very lawless state. Like, and I say that because of how difficult it is to even get a driver's license without bribing somebody. Like even just basic things that, you know, a human being should be able to access. They have become so difficult to do without bribery, without corruption, without, you know, like even something simple as um buying 10 yards of, fabric from the fabric shop. It's like there is cheating occurring there where they're, kind of trying to fool you and use the yardstick in a way where they actually, instead of selling you 10 yards of cloths, give you nine, even though you've paid for 10. So that level of lawlessness has crept into, like, the minutia of daily life. And I think that's a very dangerous place for Pakistanis, which is why so many of them, as soon as they have the ability to leave, they leave. And that is further, creating a lot of issues in the country because then who remain are not that educated. They don't have the ability to critically think. They don't have the power or the money to challenge those who are currently in power or have money because, they're taking their wealth outside of the country. They're leaving. Their connection to power is ending because they're leaving. And, you know, the the individuals who are remaining, they're increasingly um getting, more on the religious extreme end of things because the makeup of society is completely shifting. And when you have a country where most of the country doesn't have clean drinking water, like they're not going to be focused on these issues which may require, you know, more thought. They're going to just feel those feelings of anger and, take up, it's so much easier to take up arms and be part of, uh, you know, such kind of indoctrination of terrorism when you don't have the ability to critically think, when you are not educated, and when you are frustrated and angry. And that's a real issue. Pakistan's always operated in a very feudal way where, it's a very elite group of people at the top who have control. And if anyone new is rising, they will make sure you bend to their will or you die. Like they will make sure they bankrupt you and they bring you to your knees if you even show the slightest, you know, a protest against what is occurring. And that's really concerning. And it doesn't make me feel safe. Anytime I go to Pakistan, before the flight, I have such intense anxiety. Like I can't even explain the thoughts that I'm having, like, oh, what if like, there's a bomb in the market that I love to go to. Like I these are the kind of thoughts I have because that's what's occurring so frequently. And I feel like if I was Indian, that's not what would be happening because India is really, like in the last decade, it has really put itself on the global map. Like, even, when it's showing up in things that are kind of like the product of a society going beyond just trying to survive. Like, for example, in art and fashion, like, major fashion houses and ateliers are doing collaborations with Indians. And when it's showing up there, that's really showing that it's kind of the Indian economy and the Indian communities really benefiting in a way that it's creating a lot of so to say grease in the economy. There's like a huge boom that's occurring. And when you compare that to Pakistan, it's just completely gone the other way. And I feel like that's sad. It's sad for me because I think there are Pakistanis who are so talented, and if only the government and the military were to allow the people to really shine, um, this country, like what it looked like in the 60s and what it looks like now, it's completely different. And it- they just can't seem to figure it out. And I would agree, like now is the time. Now is really the time because I think this country is at its breaking point. And I feel like somewhere, I feel like India does want that because you know why? I've seen so many like videos of like former personnel in the Indian administrative services who are like part of the foreign services of India, and they're openly talking about how they'd rather Pakistan split up into four parts and becomes destabilized and weak. And I think this is the kind of mentality that is prevailing in India right now, or at least in the government or in the Indian intelligence, because that's what they're trying to achieve by funding the BLA and trying to separate Balochistan as a separate nation. They're trying to destabilize Pakistan. And I think that's a very short-sighted view because if Pakistan is so destabilized that it splits up into two parts or three or four, that's directly going to impact India. And you know, I really hope that if Pakistan does decide to turn a corner, and I don't know if the current delusional Pak army chief, if he somehow regains his senses or at least is replaced by someone who is, an enlightened being, uh, I really want there to be hope for Pakistan, and I hope that when it is turning a new corner and turning a new leaf, if it ever does, that India isn't trying to sabotage that because
Yeah,
I feel like it will. I don't see any signs of this current government of India trying to support stability in Pakistan. And I mean, I think that that's going to be like a bit of a longer topic. We'll have to do a deeper dive in a second episode with in terms of the recent events and things like that, because I think there's a lot more to unpack there. But you know, I have hope for a better future. But yeah, like any kind of last final kind of thoughts from you in that
yeah,
end.
I just wanna touch on what you just said. Like in India, it's not all like shining country where like everything is rosy and everything. In India, it's like India is there's two Indias. So there's one India which you are saying where it's like fashion and tech and all these new things are happening, and but there's also a second India which is where people are malnourished and they don't have good education, and there's a lot of other problems still existing. But on a whole, I still see like things are improving even for all sections. Things are getting better than what they were 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So there is definitely things are going in the right direction. But like in Pakistan, you need rule of law to, have any sort of development or for people to want to stay there. Like if you don't have rule of law, and it's not just about terrorism, it's the way the machinery functions, and there's also a lot of ransom calls where like people who have some money or some resources, they'll get there's kidnappings or there's a lot of things where people don't feel safe. People don't feel like if they do good, they will be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor, that they may be targeted or they may lose their wealth or they may get harmed in some way. So that's what's causing, if someone is talented, why would they want to stay in such an environment, right? So even if someone does get educated or does get skilled, they would want to leave the country as soon as possible. So again, that is again coming from Pakistan's support for all these terrorist elements, because they do cause uh, lawlessness and religious extremism and all those problems within the country. Like they're made to attack other countries, but they cause problems within the country. And there's also like regional problems, just the way their power is structured, where like other regions they don't get their fair share, like the Balochistan or Khyber, they don't get their. There's also protests in um Sindh because of their decision on uh making a new canal, where the water going to Sindh will decrease because they're making a new canal in which will go in Punjab. So like it's all of these things, no other country is doing these things, right? This is what Pakistani government or Pakistani army is doing within the country. Like no one else can fix these issues. They're not, it's not like India is coming in and forcing Pakistan that you have to stop giving water to Sindh, or you have to stop giving rights to Baluchi people. So the main cause of all these issues is the action of Pakistani state. But even even the way uh India is acting on it, like it could be short-sighted. I'm not sure like what they are sort of calculating, but it's definitely very very risky move on their part, like trying to destabilize and sort of make all these things worse. But like there's this realist school of thought, like by John Mersheimer, where they basically, because on a local level we see countries as, or like nation states as imposing rule of law, right? But on an international scale, there is no higher power which is gonna impose rule of law or impose a set of rules. It's basically anarchy. Everyone is free for themselves. So in that environment, like the bigger powers, they will try to uh, coerce and show their dominance over like other powers. Um, and it could be in various ways, like economic, military. So it is in the interest of India. If there's a weaker Pakistan, it's in the interest of India to have that. But it's it's not in its interest if Pakistan is so destabilized that the bad elements sort of take over and start taking decisions and take control of all the arms and things like that. So India is trying to weaken Pakistan, but not sort of weaken it to that extent that it completely collapses. Um, so it's a very dangerous game, but it's that's why I said like the recent government, they are very aggressive in their stance. Like usually India wouldn't take these type of actions. Like the previous governments wouldn't do such things, but this time they are like trying to portray Indian power internationally in other countries and take these type of actions.
I mean, I feel like, this kind of an ego trip will certainly it never leads to anything positive in my opinion, and I really do hope that, this is a wake-up call. It really doesn't look like, I don't know, to me it still doesn't look like both of these countries have received, the respective messages that they need to receive and reflect in order to change and improve the situation. I really do hope there's some lesson in this for Pakistan because, the Pakistani in me really would love, a Pakistan that, I can live in securely, that I can thrive in, that I can build a business in, that I can, add to the economy too. And since, I've been five, that's been a pipe dream. Um, However, I feel like it's not a pipe dream in India. Like, let's say I was Indian, it's not a pipe dream, even though India does have its own issues, it probably should be focusing on than, focusing on trying to go on some kind of power trip, with expanding its operations in even in Canada, conducting the extrajudicial killing of Najar and its activities in supporting certain activities in Balochistan as well. Um, I really do hope both of these countries really learn to focus on their own issues. Because yeah, I completely agree that there is a lot of issues in Pakistan itself, and I've seen it firsthand. I've seen the difference when I'm in Punjab versus when I'm in Sindh, even in the kind of infrastructure. Like Karachi is just decaying, and then if I when I go to Islamabad, it's like everything's clean. They're coming up with new schemes to improve things. So there definitely are issues. And I just hope it doesn't get to this point again because as a result of these, recent conflicts, there was a lot of tension and stress in my friendship with a lot of my Indian friends. I mean, let's be honest here, most of my friends are Indian. And I just know that I don't want to experience that kind of stress in my friendships again. And hopefully, we can work towards a future where an Indian and a Pakistani, like you and I, can engage in a conversation like this and actually unpack these issues without an emotional charge and an aggressive defensiveness and remain equanimous and actually discuss issues that are going on with hopes for peace and harmony. So thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. Hopefully we have um, more ideas for collaborating in the future. If you are interested in coming as a guest onto the Indo Pak Diaries podcast once again, and thank you so much. Appreciate you being here, and yeah, I'll see you next time, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. See you next time.
Awesome.